Okay, so I'm very excited about this video because usually the way it works on my channel has been I watch a show, I make 3 videos in that video essay style format, and then I cap it all off with a tier list. And for this one, for One Piece, the epic 1,000+ tale saga, I wanted to do something a little different. Mainly because I saw the number of characters on the tier list for the character tier list, and I started sweating bullets. As I do with all my tier lists, let's just quickly run down the ranking gauntlet so we all know what the definitions mean. Now, at the very top, you have One Peak. Essentially, this is Oda at his best. He is popping off chapter to chapter. Every character is like having nice little moments. It's just like an overall enjoyable experience for me specifically. Now, Amazing is right below that in that it might be all of those things, but it just doesn't quite resonate the same for me personally as One Peak. I don't associate it with the most enjoyable experience of all time enjoying this series, but I still love these arcs immensely. They're just not my absolute top 3 favorites. Below Amazing is Great, and now at Great, I think this is pretty self-explanatory. And below that, we have Delightful. I went with a little D pun there because I really wanted one. I wanted to say M-I-D or like me-id, but it wouldn't have hit the same as I went through this entire video, so I went with Delightful. It just means it's a good, solid arc. It is above average One Piece. Now, mid is kind of self-explanatory. If you've been on any Twitter or any anime space in the last 2 years, you know what this word means. Essentially, the way I'm describing mid is a 5 out of 10. A solid meh. Now, boring is essentially just me being bored out of my absolute mind. Bad essentially means it was a complete waste of time, energy. It felt like it just didn't need to be there. It detracted from the story. Oda was padding for time, and imagining having to wait week to week for it to be over is nothing short of like a monkish experience in patience. You are going to ascend and achieve nirvana if you sit through a bad One Piece arc. Now, garbage just means unwatchable, unreadable, unconsumable by humans. It should not ever, under any circumstances, ever be considered anything above existing. That is the only credit I will give it. Anything else beyond that is just too much praise for it. Now, with that being said, let's get started. All right, now kicking it off with the East Blue Saga, we have Romance Dawn. Now, as the introduction for Luffy, Zoro, and Nami, I actually found Romance Dawn to be a pretty nice arc, and to this day, it has one of my top 5 favorite One Piece panels of all time, and it is the scene that single-handedly got me hooked on One Piece from the very beginning, and that is when Luffy, without any hesitation, told Kobe, a crying, sniveling, scared child, that he was the person he hated most in the world, a sniveling coward, and I just loved it. I loved Luffy after that. He instantly became my favorite shonen MC. I just loved everything about it because it was a microcosm of Luffy's entire character, essentially. It was somehow kind and horrible. It was a horrible thing to say, and it showed me that at his very core, Luffy is not a great person. And I don't mean that like he's evil or even like Gon in any way, just like he has this little bit of edge to him that just screams, yeah, this guy's a pirate. And I just instantly love that. On top of Zoro's great introduction and their whole dynamic kicking off that way, I absolutely adore Romance Dawn, and it does a great job of setting the tone for the entire One Piece story moving forward. It is solidly, for me, delightful. So funny story, I actually had to stop recording and look up Orangetown because I completely forgot what the hell happened in that arc. I literally looked at it for a solid minute and I was like, did somebody put filler on this list? But no, Orangetown is the arc where Buggy gets first introduced, and it has that whole sequence with that little dog, and it's really sweet. But like, honestly, I think Buggy is a stellar character after Orangetown, but insofar as being the main villain of a One Piece arc, I don't think Buggy is quite right for that position. On top of being kind of mid in storytelling, the fact that I actually forgot it, despite having some of the biggest moments in the series, like Luffy getting his straw hat punctured, scars that have remained to this day, by the way, and the introduction of God D Buggy, then I'm sorry, Orangetown is boring. Now, next up is Syrup Village, aka Usopp's intro arc, and I'll be real here. I think Usopp had kind of the weakest introduction out of all the Straw Hats, and it's safe to say that Usopp stocks have definitely increased with time. And I don't know how hot of a take this is, but early Usopp was definitely my least favorite Straw Hat of the entire series. I think he was not only the weakest of the crew, but he was also kind of annoying, with little moments here and there of like genuinely beautiful character moments for him that show off how brave he actually is, his motivations, etc., and everything that made him a very compelling character down the line. But aside from that, the villains of this arc, specifically Captain Kuro, did definitely make an impression on me, more than I thought he would, and I think that has to do with the fact that Kuro's motivations as a character are criminally underrated. This guy had some of the most compelling depth to him, despite like how surface level it may have seemed, but Kuro genuinely hated being a pirate, which is not something that we have ever really seen in the entirety of One Piece's run. For every pirate before or since, none of them have ever gone back on their decisions or even regretted their decision to be pirates, so it makes Kuro's motivations that much more fascinating, and that scene where he's looking at that newspaper of Luffy's new bounty on a pirate ship a little heartbreaking, because because at the end of the day, Kuro, as messed up as he was, and as evil as he was with the crimes he was committing, still had one of the most relatable human backstories of any character in One Piece, especially any villain. And I think that alone bumps up Syrup Village to mid. Now, honestly, I think nobody's gonna argue with me on this one. Baratier is undisputedly one of One Piece's greatest arcs of all time. To this day, I still rank it in my top 10, maybe even top 5 One Piece arcs of all time. There was something so special about Baratier. Sanji's introduction, the first time the Straw Hats even had something remotely resembling a full crew acting all at the same time. But honestly, above all that, Baratier's biggest contribution to the story, he gave us a larger sense of how dangerous the Grand Line could be, because Don Krieg's fleet, the entirety of his crew, his very powerful, fully armored crew, was just not enough to even get past Paradise. On top of that, Mihawk's introduction also showed us just how expansive the intermilitary systems of the world government are, as well as how powerful some of these people on the Grand Line can be. And in retrospect, yeah, Mihawk was such an aggressive introduction to that premise. To this day, we still don't know how strong he is. And even right now, some people argue he's at Yonko level, and that's absolutely crazy to me, because right now, as of One Piece chapter 1044, we've seen the ceiling of Yonko level, and if people are still putting Mihawk in that, and honestly, I blame Oda for this to some degree, because he has not given us a really very definitive, clear indication of how strong Mihawk actually is, because he was not trying in Marineford, let's be honest. But all of that discourse, all of these theories, all of this intrigue in Mihawk all started here in Baratier, and also introduced my personal favorite Straw Hat, Sanji. And on top of that, it gave us one of the greatest moments ever in the series for Zoro to date, and that is when he holds up his sword after losing to Mihawk and proclaiming to Luffy, the future Pirate King, that he will never lose again. And that scene alone, the emotions it elicited out of me, and Mihawk for that degree, just made this arc an absolute must-read, must-own, must-see, beautiful arc. And I think with all that being said, Baratier is most definitely going to be the first arc in One Peak. Very well deserved. So next on our docket is Arlong Park, and look, I think this is going to be the first controversial pick of this video, and that's the fact that I personally wasn't too jazzed about Arlong Park. I think on first watch, it's definitely way more interesting than it is on rereads or rewatches, mainly because Nami has never been my favorite Straw Hat. Like, there's no bad Straw Hats, I want to make that perfectly clear, but I have favorites, just like anybody else. And I think Arlong Park, as a showcase of not only Nami's backstory and her abilities, but also a showcase of the relationship the Straw Hats have with each other, specifically the relationship Luffy has with his crew, is the highlight of this entire arc. Is that scene where Luffy just tells Arlong, I can't cook, I don't know how to use a sword, and I can't read a map. What I can do is fight for my friends. And that is one of the greatest Luffy moments. It doesn't even crack his top 10, if we're being honest, because One Piece is, above all else, basically Luffy's story. But that moment was just something that really stuck with me, because it really showcased the faith that Luffy had in his crew, and by extension, the relationship he has with his navigator, Nami. And Nami understood this when Luffy put his Straw Hat on her to comfort her, and understood, yeah, I can't fight Arlong, Luffy can, but he can't sail to save his life, so I have his back there. And by far, Nami and Luffy's relationship is one of my favorites in the entire series. But on the general enjoyment aspect of this arc, I don't really like it. I think it's kind of boring. Arlong is kind of a meh villain. And one of the weirdest things that I keep hearing is that people who recommend One Piece to other people say, oh my god, One Piece gets like amazing at Arlong Park. Arlong Park is fine. It is serviceable, okay? It is a fine arc. It's not too long, it doesn't overstay its welcome, and it's more or less Nami officially joining the crew in spirit, because I've noticed that there's been this theme with Straw Hats in that they don't officially join the crew until their hearts are in it. They could have some prior obligation, they could have something emotionally blocking them, or some other means that prevent them from fully committing to being a Straw Hat. Until that's resolved is when I officially consider them to be part of the crew. So this was a great introduction and great segue into Nami officially joining the Straw Hat Pirates. But still, so I am going to put Arlong Park in delightful. One of the things I should really mention is that not all arcs are going to get equal airtime in terms of how much I talk about them, either because they didn't resonate with me as much, or genuinely because I just don't have that much to say about them, especially if they rank below delightful. So keep that in mind. Anyway, let's get moving. So Logtown is a bit tricky because it is technically an important arc in One Piece, because if you hold Logtown stocks, which by the way I definitely recommend you should, they're going to age like fine wine, especially as we get closer to the end of the series, then this arc is massive because it introduces Smoker, Dragon, and the return of Buggy and Alvida. And it was also the first personally significant island that the Straw Hats have visited, because it's where the first king of the pirates, Gold D. Roger, died. And obviously, we all, as an audience, felt like a Luffy, and we wanted to see this island. But it was fine. You know, like, aside from, like, a pretty cool introduction to Smoker and his Logia abilities, which, by the way, were apparently where Smoker peaked, because it's all been kind of downhill from there. But aside from that, I think Logtown is perfectly fine. It's not forgettable, but it's not memorable. It is adequate. And with that in mind, I am going to put Logtown in mid. Okay, second hot take of the video. Third, if you count the Arlong Park one as a very hot take. But I did not like Reverse Mountain. I find it to be one of the most boring arcs in the entire series. I feel like it just runs on for way too long. The Laboon story is kind of cute, and, you know, Crocus's importance after the fact, and especially his connection to Brook, who's my second favorite Straw Hat, by the way, is very cool, but it's kind of one of those things that's better retroactively when you learn about Brook's backstory. But aside from that, on its own, in a vacuum, and especially as part of the series, I didn't really enjoy it. I thought it was like, whatever. Don't really have much to say, aside from the fact that I can't wait to see Brook and Laboon's reunion, as I'm sure we all are. But on its own, Reverse Mountain is kind of boring. So when it comes to Whiskey Peak, I have to just preface this. I'm not a huge fan of Alabasta as a saga, and we'll get to the arc later down the line, but I think Whiskey Peak is not a great way to introduce it. I think the personal highlight for Whiskey Peak was the drinking match and the crew just having fun initially, and Zoro doing his Zoro shit, but we're not going to talk about that today. But like, the introduction of Baroque Works was kind of cool in concept, but really once you meet the top 3 Baroque Works agents, you don't really care at that point. The villains aren't crazy for me, and I really love the fact that there's more there to job for Luffy and Zoro than anything else, because they were like on some crazy energy. But aside from all that, honestly, I wouldn't think too deeply about Whiskey Peak on its own. So here's the thing, I originally had Whiskey Peak as bad, but then I saw the next arc and I actually had to bump it up to boring. So Whiskey Peak is officially boring. Now, with that being said, let's talk about Little Garden. Now, Little Garden I find to be the hardest arc to sit down and watch and or read. It is, by any stretch of the imagination, too long. I don't care about Dory and Bragi. I don't care about any of the giant stuff. The only cool thing about it was the effect it had on Usopp's character to look up to the giants and aspire to be a brave warrior like them. Aside from that, dull arc, dull premise, dull island, dull actions, just dull all around. I do not like it. So it's going to be the very first arc that we have in bad. All right, next up we have Drum Island, aka the introduction to Chopper, Dr. Chopper. As origin stories go for Straw Hats, I think Chopper is definitely top 5 saddest, maybe even top 3, because wow, no other arc in One Piece has almost made me viscerally cry as much as Drum Island. And it was also a great introduction for Chopper. He instantly became like one of the best Straw Hats, and I'm tearing up just thinking about it right now. I love Drum Island. It's definitely a must visit on rewatches and rereads, so you better not skip it. With that in mind, I'm gonna put it in great. All right, so we're probably going to get onto my biggest hot take of the series, and that is the fact that I don't really like Alabasta that much. The scenery gets kind of exhausting. Vivi is grating. Oh my god. Dude, I can't believe some people are still caping for her to be a Straw Hat. What would she even bring to the crew, bro? She would literally be the biggest liability on that ship. She has, like, no fighting experience. And yes, I know Luffy doesn't choose people based on their strength, Kreams. Okay, whatever. He doesn't choose them based on their strength, but damn, dude. He can't be everywhere at once, especially if he's about to, like, wage war in the entire world. Like, honestly, Nami and Usopp have been kind of skating by very, like, by the skin of their teeth, especially Usopp, but even still, I think Vivi would fare much, much worse, especially in a place like Wano. At least Nami has Zeus now. Just, like, that whole conversation about Vivi is a whole video in itself, or maybe a TikTok, follow me there. I've been doing most of my One Piece commentary on TikTok, so check that out in the link in the description. But honestly, my biggest, like, sticking point with Alabasta is just, like, I didn't really find it a fun arc to consume, because despite it being a civil war, not a lot of people died. Crocodile was definitely the highlight. He really showcased the One Piece villains are genuinely smart thing that I really love about One Piece villains. But aside from that, that entire arc was just kind of a massive miss for me. Yes, the introduction of Ace was cool, but aside from that, it was kind of like, bleh. I don't like Alabasta. I don't think it has any, like, oomph to it, you know what I mean? And also, again, I really have to, like, get this home, because, like, I don't think I really got across just how much I don't like it. I do not like the scenery in Alabasta. I literally felt myself sweating just looking at it. Like, I had to turn on my air conditioner to watch that fucking arc. But I guess that's a good thing in retrospect, because, like, Oda's world building is just so amazing. You feel the hotness and stickiness of Alabasta and how desperate it is. And I honestly get why people love Alabasta. I think it has its great moments. And I think maybe if it was in a different setting and Vivi was in there, I would definitely enjoy it way more. But aside from Crocodile, the biggest highlight of that arc was Nico Robin, the introduction of the poneglyphs, and the whole world building aspect of the One Piece world, which is, by the way, peak One Piece, in my opinion. Like, whenever there's a poneglyph or Marijois or, like, the Navy, you know some shit's going down. So I love that aspect of Alabasta. It really set the stage for that. And also, we got to see Smoker again, for what that's worth. I think Alabasta definitely has its highlights, despite, like, me personally not loving it and not having it be my favorite series. There are specific scenes that I just absolutely adore in Alabasta. But all of that culminates in Alabasta being a very delightful arc. So next up, we have Jaya / Mocktown. Honestly, one of the best arcs in the series, great introduction for Blackbeard. That scene remains iconic, and it also has some of the best pacing, I think, in any One Piece arc, just in terms of moving the story forward and not wasting too much time on filler. But unfortunately, the real low point for me was the Gorilla Pirates and the whole thing with Nolan and that aspect. I just felt it was kind of blech. Yes, I get what the reasoning for it was, and yes, it was very touching when I first watched it, but I find the need to like kind of rush through it every now and then because it just kind of like sucks. It's not as engaging as a clash in philosophies, the conversation and introduction with Blackbeard. It's definitely like the lowest point of that entire arc. So Jaya is going to be in the top of delightful. Alright, next up we have Skypeia, aka one of my top 5 favorite arcs of all time. Now, the thing is with Skypeia, I will admit about 30 to 40% of it is just flat out boring or flat out useless. It doesn't matter, like, it's so dull, right? Especially any scenes with the Skypeians. Throw them in the bucket, whatever. But Eneru, bro, mwah. S+ tier One Piece villain. Still one of my top 3 favorite One Piece villains of all time, period, bar none. Love Eneru. And the sheer amount of world building and lore that happened in this arc was unprecedented. It made Alabasta look like ass compared to it. Well, it already made it look like ass because Vivi was in it. It was just amazing. And I think people that skip out on Skypeia, I understand it at first. I was like, oh, this seems kind of like out of the way, especially because this was the first time we got the introduction of Shanks and Whitebeard. So it felt like a lot of the action was being missed out on. But to those naysayers, I say, do not skip Skypeia. And without spoilers, I'm going to say that those of you who held on to your Skypeia stocks have now seen very generous dividends. So as a Skypeia apologist, it is very nice to see that. Now, do I think that 30% hurts Skypeia that much? Well, I don't know. That's kind of up to you. I personally say it's firmly skippable in retrospect, and if you only want to see the highlights, those are definitely the highest points in the series. And also, one of the smallest little things that I don't think most people appreciate is the fact that Eneru, to this day, has still been the only villain that Luffy has ever fought to achieve their dream and accomplish their goal after fighting him. People keep forgetting Eneru wanting to destroy both islands was not his dream. His dream was to go to the moon. He did that. He's solid. He built a spaceship. So the fact that not only did he get away, accomplish his dream, but the only thing that Luffy stopped was just like a side thing he thought would be funny was just amazing. It was mwah. So 10 out of 10 villain, 7 out of 10 story, 8 out of 10 world building. I gotta give Skypeia its proper respect and put it in amazing. And now for the worst follow-up act of all time, Long Ring, Long Land. So I think that this arc is probably the most hated arc in all of One Piece, and I think it's perfectly understandable why. To me, this arc is very inoffensive. It's more boring and unremarkable than anything else. This arc, I feel, is above all else odd, right? I think we can all agree it sticks out like a sore thumb compared to every other One Piece arc before and after. Without getting too into the weeds about why I'm doing this, just like with Skypeia, I'm gonna hold on to my Long Ring, Long Land stocks. And I'm including the thing with Aokiji just to give it some kind of a boost, but just because that was definitely great writing right there, I'm not gonna say Foxy is garbage, but I'm going to say it was just boring. And now we get on to my favorite arc in all of One Piece, Water 7. Yes, this right here is, to me, peak One Piece. It is a showcase of how talented Oda is as a writer, not only in writing specific arcs, but whole sagas, because there was no moment in Water 7, aside from maybe the very, 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 very beginning before they even entered the city, that I was like, oh my god, this is so boring. Everything, from the moment we got to Water City, was non-stop action. The entire sequence with the Frankie family, Usopp, the whole fight with him and Luffy and the Mary, and Enies Lobby and Robin, there was so much. And on top of all of that, it had the best setting in any One Piece story, bar none, a sea train. You guys may not know this about me, but I am a sucker for trains, okay? Any kind of murder mystery on the Orient Express kind of like story that's like, ooh, train, but it's like fancy. I'm a sucker for it. I am a train nerd, all right? Especially in fiction. And that sea train, bro, that entire sequence, especially in the anime, just the aesthetics of it were nailed so beautifully. And I loved every second of it. And on top of that, the Enies Lobby arc, the moment with Robin that just makes me tear up, the moment with Gear 2nd, the fight with Rob Lucci and CP9, great moments all around for the entire crew. And it's also the debut of Sanji's new leg burning thing that he just whipped out of nowhere. I'm not even gonna harp on it because Water 7 is a whole, I could just sit here for 3 hours and tell you everything I loved about Water 7. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try to make this video somewhat decent but just so you know, Water 7 is my absolute favorite One Piece arc, bar none. So it is going at the very top of One Piece. This is going to be a pun for all you audio nerds. When I said peak like that, it also peaked on my waveform. So a small note here that I just realized right now is that I consider all of Water 7, like the Water 7 saga, to be one arc. So yes, I know that it's technically divided up into smaller arcs, but like it's not. Let's be honest. Like Water 7 is the collective story of their entire time being in Water 7 and Enies Lobby. So Thriller Bark is kind of 50-50 for me. On one hand, introduced my second favorite Straw Hat, and on the other hand, Gecko Moria and his entire circus wasn't really my cup of tea, and I think I would have popped off on the scenery and the visual language of Thriller Bark. Kuma definitely came in and really helped pick up the slack, but I think the fact that happened kind of showed that Oda even thought Moria was like pathetic on his own. Like, and this was at the time 51 chapters was considered a lot. You remember those days? Yeah. So I think the fact that things like Nightmare Luffy, Brook joining, and all this other little stuff happening kind of went a long way to make Thriller Bark a little bit more enjoyable, and I think it's one of the more fun arcs. I'm going to put Thriller Bark in delightful. I think you can make an argument for it being higher if you were to separate certain parts of it, but I think as a whole, Thriller Bark as an experience was pretty good. So I actually really enjoy Sabaody. I think the themes it touches, the execution, the introduction of the supernovas, instantly loved Kid and Law when I first saw them, on top of world building, which I am a sucker for. Sabaody was definitely amazing, and as far as the first major defeat for the crew goes, wow, did Sabaody nail that as well. And all these little things kind of coalesced into making a very, very, like, can't miss action pack, and it is by far one of One Piece's best arcs. So it earns the amazing treatment. Next up, we have Amazon Lily. Say 80% of this arc is pretty boring. Most of the enjoyability of this arc comes down near the end with the revelation of Boa Hancock and her sister's origin, as well as their dynamic with Luffy. And it was one of the few times like One Piece gags ever really truly made me like chuckle out loud with the do all men stretch thing. So I thought that was very amusing. And you know, that scene where they were washing him in the lake was on some demon time, but let's not talk about that. Overall, I'd say Amazon Lily is just mid, like top of mid. I'd say if not for nothing, at least 80% of this arc can be like hand waved away. But that last 20% is some fire, which I've now realized after doing all these arcs, there seems to be like a running gag in Oda's writing. Oh my god. Okay, so as for Impel Down, I think if you read it in the manga, it's going to be way better than it is in the anime, unless you're watching some fan edits like One Piece or One Piece Kai. Impel Down is a very enjoyable, relatively short, action-packed arc. You get to see the return of Buggy, Mr. 3, and a lot of like the Rogue's greatest hits, really, from all the previous arcs. It's a really nice retrospective, along with the introduction of Jinbei. I really, really enjoyed Impel Down. I like the whole prison break aspect of it, and I really liked Ivankov's introduction, and I loved Bon Clay. I already liked Bon Clay in Alabasta, but I think it was after we saw him in Impel Down that Bon Clay went from like a B tier character to an S tier character. I love Bon Clay. Great compelling villain. The assistant warden, peak comedy in One Piece, loved him. Same with Buggy and Mr. 3. Just overall, a great experience. So I'm giving Impel Down the amazing treatment. Ooh, okay, Marineford. I think this kind of goes without saying, but Marineford was unprecedented. It is one of those arcs that I just can't believe to this day that Oda managed to write. Not that I don't believe in his ability, but rather I didn't think he'd have follow through to actually kill anybody in a war. In Marineford, the fact that he actually doubled down, killed Ace and Whitebeard, and Whitebeard's speech, Blackbeard's plans, all the Marines on display, hockey, everything was just stunning. It was an amazing experience from start to finish. And I think that if Oda ever wants to do another Marineford or a sequel to Marineford or a secondary war, that's the bar. That's the bar that has to be set. And I pray that we at least get a few more deaths than we did in Marineford, because that right there, peak. I don't think there's going to be any argument that Marineford is at the very top of One Peak. So post-war, I actually enjoyed quite a bit. It was really short. I wouldn't say it's peak One Piece like Marineford and Impel Down and all the other ones were, but I wouldn't say it was boring or mid either. So with that in mind, is a solid, very firm, great. Return to Sabaody. Not my favorite. I'll be real. I didn't love Return to Sabaody. Like, I hated the fake Straw Hat things. I really enjoyed seeing the crew come back together with their new designs and, you know, them reuniting. But I really wish Oda gave us more time to really, like, sit down, have the characters catch up, have, like, these nice little moments of interaction instead of just jumping straight through into Fishman Island and doing all that. I really wanted them to, like, catch up. They haven't seen each other for 2 years. For me, it just reads like an unnatural reaction. If you don't see somebody after a long time, the first thing you do is sit down, hug them, catch up. But with the Straw Hats, they did, 2 out of 3 of those. So I really wish we could have seen that more. And also, fuck the fake Straw Hats. But it was also really nice to see how strong they all got. So I'm putting Return to Sabaody right between Thriller Bark and Jaya. And now to Midman Island. So this is one of those cases that I mentioned earlier where the ending greater than sign the rest of the arc. Bro, Fishman Island is a struggle to get through. Like 70% of this arc is just so dull. I'm not saying it's like impossible to sit through, but it is definitely way easier to read than it is to watch. I actually had to stop and switch to the manga to get through this arc because I just could not bear. I didn't care about any of the characters. Aside from Neptune's immediate family, I just didn't care about the fishmen. Still don't really care about Kami and Hachi, but that's a whole other thing. And I think this point has been hammered home like a trillion times, but I'm going to repeat it one more time for everybody out there, so say it along with me. Horty was an ass villain. So lame. Worst One Piece villain of all time. Honestly, the only redeeming parts of Fishman Island were the world building, little character moments with Luffy and Shirahoshi, seeing how strong the crew is now and all their new abilities, which I said in Sabaody, but like the expanded crew, seeing the Fishman Island being drawn, which I think Oda really seriously popped off on. Like next to Whole Cake Island and Thriller Bark, I think Fishman Island is firmly in number 2 in terms of like beautiful settings. And seeing Luffy reunite with Jinbei was also cool, but honestly, Fishman Island, above all else, is just there for pretty colors and lore. Read the colored version of Fishman Island. That's my recommendation here. As far as Fishman Island's ranking goes, I'd say it's in top of mid. Next up, we have Punk Hazard. Honestly, I'm not going to dwell on this one too much. Punk Hazard is definitely in mid as well. It's right below Fishman Island. I think it was slightly less enjoyable from a world-building perspective because, yes, it was the spot where Aokiji and Akainu dueled, but we never actually got to see that fight, and it was also nice to see Trafalgar Law again, but the whole giant kid, Caesar the Clown being the main villain thing just wasn't appealing to me. I found it kind of lame, and Smoker taking yet another L was also kind of sad to see. But as far as introductions to Kinemon and Momo, I think it made up for it slightly in the arc. But otherwise, I think that Punk Hazard doesn't even have the redeeming qualities that Fishman Island had in its lore and world building. So with that in mind, I'm going to put it firmly behind Fishman Island in mid. Okay, next up, we have Dressrosa. Okay. Now, I don't know how people feel about Dressrosa in retrospect, but I personally loved it. And that's coming from somebody who wasn't reading it weekly, so my opinion is kind of skewed because I got through it in like the matter of a couple days. So I can't imagine what it was like sitting through this arc week to week, let alone watching it in the anime. Oh my god, thoughts and prayers. I forgot where I saw it, but it was like a video where somebody was like describing how horrible the viewing experience for the Dressrosa anime arc was, where they kept including Vanessa's flashbacks like 80 trillion times to the point where the person telling the story started dreaming of Vanessa's flashbacks on their own. And I was like, oh my god, yikes. Yeah, Vanessa's flashbacks was definitely the most abused aspect of Dressrosa, but I think if you watch and or read any other version of One Piece, then this is definitely the way to go. Dressrosa is definitely a read, don't watch. But aside from that, Doflamingo, peak villain, Trafalgar Law, great character, Bellamy's return, Sabo's return, all of that was just really, really fun. And I think Dressrosa is in my top 5 arcs, actually. So I'm also putting it in one peak, right next to Baratier. I don't love it quite as much as I love Water 7, but it's up there. Okay, now Zoo, super short arc. Honestly, I didn't like it. Kind of a boring experience from beginning to end. I didn't really like any of the things that I saw aside from that moment with Momo and Luffy hearing the voice of all things and Zunisha and all that. Zoo as an arc, like on its own, was probably one of the most forgettable arcs, if not the most forgettable arcs in the New World. So that lands it firmly in boring. Whole Cake Island. I'm gonna just tell you right off the rip, it is at the very top of amazing. Listen, you guys already know Sanji is my favorite Straw Hat. I love Sanji so much. And Whole Cake Island was like this just ode to Sanji, and it addressed everything, every complaint everybody had about his character after the time skip, as well as the introduction to a Yonko for the first time, their territory, Whole Cake Island, the best scenery in all of One Piece, that entire storyline, Beiji, that raid, the cake, everything, the fight with Katakuri, everything about Whole Cake Island was done and executed to perfection. And it is one of those arcs where I feel like at any point you could have ended the arc and it would have been fine, but I'm glad that Oda did all the endings. He did every run through and I couldn't be happier because I just loved Whole Cake Island. I'm one of those people that like doesn't mind a long arc as long as like I enjoy what I see, you know, as evidenced by Dressrosa and Water 7 being up there. Now, would I put Whole Cake Island up there? I don't know because I'd have to like rewatch it a couple times on its own, but honestly, I'd say just on Sanji's arc alone, I could see myself bumping it up to one peak at some point in time. But as of right now, the very top of amazing is not too shabby. Next up, we have the Reverie, aka the shortest arc. I think Reverie is by far the shortest arc in One Piece, which is very funny because it's right next to the longest arc in One Piece to date. Reverie, on its own as a premise, I think is really interesting. It was really nice to see it, and it was really sad to see what happened to Kuma. And I think the coolest part of it was just seeing just how many times Oda repeated his own story in a very nice callback kind of kind of way, not in an unoriginal way. What I mean is, Luffy has saved a lot of kingdoms and teamed up with a lot of princesses, so it was really nice to see all of them interact, you know, Vivi, Shirahoshi, Rebecca, and all of these characters from before and after the time skip interact. And on top of that, we got to see the introduction to Im, the Gorosei, the Empty Throne, all this cool world building stuff. I think Reverie on its own is just very delightful. It's just very pleasant to see. It's cool that we even got to see it. I would kill to know what the hell happened to Kuma. Please, Oda, tell us what the hell happened to Kuma. What is that backstory? How did he end up there? What is going on with this guy? So now we are finally at Wano. And I just want to say one thing before I rank this arc, and that is, if you were to make this list in the last 2.5 years, I'd say that at that point we were at least like, what, 20% into Wano, 30% into Wano, then your opinion at any point in this juncture over the last 4 years would be vastly different. Like, if you were to take Wano from like 2.5 years ago, right? What's this, 2019? You would probably have way different opinions than you would have even 2 weeks ago from when I'm recording this video. It's crazy to me that Wano is just so expansive that it covers that much of One Piece in its entirety. I think at this point, Wano is roughly 1/10 the entire run of One Piece. I think when they get out of Wano, it's going to be hilarious to really take in the fact that Wano has gone on for longer than some series have ever been serialized. As of right now, as of April 5th, this version of Wano, I want to say, is at the very bottom of amazing. Now, I think that's it, guys. That is all the arcs in One Piece ranked. If you'll notice, I'm surprised by this as well. There are no garbage arcs. I don't think there's any such thing as like a garbage arc in One Piece, and I just love this series, and I'm so happy I got into it. Expect more One Piece videos. I know this was a bit unconventional of me to do, especially with this kind of tier. It's not even the proper tier list that I do to end, right? I do an entire character tier list, so I'm really glad that I did this, and I sat down and I really made it about the arcs, because wow, even at 31 arcs, the raw footage for this video is roughly an hour and 26 minutes. And honestly, I'm hoping to somehow get this video below the 30-minute mark. So that's going to be a challenge in and of itself. Let me know where you would put all these arcs. At me on Twitter to show me yours. I really want to see them. I'll even leave a link to the tier list I use in the description so you can tag me on Twitter and follow my TikTok. So if you like this video and you want to see more One Piece content on my channel, then please, please, please give this video a fat like, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment below, peep your sub box for more One Piece content. All right, thanks for watching. Bye!